Sophie Cunningham gets elbowed in the face. Look at this.
They call
Sophie Cunningham gets elbowed in the face, and somehow this is a foul on Sophie Cunningham. Yeah, I shit you not. Sophie Cunningham gets elbowed in the face, and they somehow call this a foul on Sophie Cunningham. The worst part is, these dummies, these stooge referees, reviewed this play too, and still came to the conclusion that the foul is on Sophie Cunningham. You can't make this up.
What happens when a player speaks up, and the very next time she steps onto the court, the whistles seem to disappear? That is the question fans could not stop asking after Sophie Cunningham took a hard elbow that left everyone staring at the replay instead of the scoreboard. Was it simply another physical WNBA moment, or did her outspoken comments about women in women's sports put an even bigger target on her back? The controversy only grew louder from there, and the footage has everyone picking a side.
So we have Cheryl Reeve opening up about this Sophie Cunningham situation. If you guys don't know, this thing has been really hitting the fan. Now, Cheryl Reeve made some comments about Sophie Cunningham yesterday in her pre-press conference, and today she followed it up with speaking to Sophie before the game. Now, there was a photo that has been floating around online of these two talking before the game. Let me get it pulled up for you guys. Now, we all know that Sophie Cunningham has found herself in a wormhole, man. She got these rallies being led.
For a league that constantly says it wants tough, competitive basketball, this sequence left a lot of people wondering where that standard suddenly disappeared. Sophie Cunningham has built a reputation for playing with intensity, standing up for teammates, and never backing away from controversy.
The Indiana Fever, from a public relations standpoint, they cannot get out of their own way. If they did not believe when they dropped this injury report and Sophie Cunningham randomly shows up right after she has to put out a statement in what looks like a, oh crap, I've done gotten my arm twisted, my elbow twisted by the Indiana Fever leadership. And look, Sophie's going to deny that.
But lately, many fans believe something has changed, and this latest incident only poured gasoline on that conversation. During the play, Cunningham absorbed a clear elbow that immediately caught the attention of everyone watching. The contact was obvious enough that the replay kept getting shown from multiple angles, and with every replay came the same reaction from viewers.
Comments by Indiana Fever's Sophie Cunningham sparked a pregame clash between fans outside the Moda Center tonight. Fox 12's Michaela Armstrong spoke to protesters about the bigger debate they say her comments have reignited.
And this is what people be talking about, man. The manufactured MVP, bro. When you actually watch these games and not just look at the box score or just look at, the highlights, you get the being like, oh yeah, these referees, this company, like we see something.
Surely the officials would see it this time. Surely this was the moment the whistle would finally come. Instead, nothing. No foul, no correction, no relief for Cunningham after taking the contact. That decision instantly shifted the conversation away from the game itself and straight toward the officiating.
It could have been a heated exchange that took place between these two. Now, Cheryl Reeve did have on a very intimidating t-shirt that we're not even finna dive into because I'm really tired of talking about this whole situation at this point. Like, I feel where Sophie was coming from. I just never thought in a million years this thing could just boil over the way it has, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. Now, with that being said, Cheryl Reeve spoke to the media, and Olivia Miles did too, and Olivia Miles is straight bragging about being Kayla Clark.
Fans were not debating whether the contact happened because the replay spoke for itself. They were debating something else entirely. How could officials review the sequence, watch the same footage everyone else was watching, and still conclude that no foul had occurred? That question spread across social media almost immediately, and it became even more explosive because of everything surrounding Cunningham over the past several weeks. Her comments about women competing in women's sports had already made her one of the most talked about players in the league. Reporters praised her for saying what they believed many athletes were afraid to say publicly, while critics argued that her remarks deserved pushback. Regardless of which side people landed on, one thing was undeniable. Sophie Cunningham had become one of the biggest lightning rods in the WNBA. That is why this play attracted so much attention. To many fans, it was no longer just about one missed whistle. They began asking whether Cunningham was now being officiated differently because of the spotlight surrounding her. Fair or unfair, that perception has continued to grow every time another close call seems to go against her. Of course, officiating mistakes happen in every professional sport. Referees are human. Games move at incredible speed, and missed calls are part of basketball. But what frustrates fans is when a play appears obvious even after multiple replay angles, yet the outcome never changes. That is when frustration quickly turns into suspicion, and suspicion fuels debates that can overshadow the game itself.
Coach, there was an anti-trans rally before the game, inspired by a WNBA player. As a member of the LGBTQ plus community and in your workplace, what was your reaction knowing that this was happening right outside of your door?
Yeah, I mean, Seattle and this organization and Climate Pledge, we always want to be an area where people feel welcome coming into this building. I think we've always done a really good job with that. So I know our organization was, working closely with Climate Pledge and with security to just make sure that, everybody feels safe and included.
Whether this was simply another missed call or just unfortunate timing is something every fan will judge differently. However, one thing is impossible to ignore. Every controversial whistle involving Sophie Cunningham now carries extra weight because of everything that has happened off the court. And if more moments like this continue to pile up, the league may find itself spending more time answering questions about officiating than celebrating the basketball being played. The strange part is that this story did not stop with one controversial hit on Sophie Cunningham. In fact, that play became the spark for a much larger conversation because many fans now believe the atmosphere surrounding Cunningham has changed dramatically ever since she publicly commented on the debate over women's sports. Whether you agree with her position or strongly disagree with it, the reaction inside and outside the league has become impossible to ignore. What really poured gasoline on the fire was the sequence everyone keeps replaying. Cunningham absorbs a hard elbow. The officials have a clear view. The play is reviewed, and yet no foul is called. That is the moment that left social media asking the same question over and over again. If officials are given the opportunity to slow everything down and examine the contact from multiple angles, how does that still result in no whistle? For many viewers, it looked less like a missed call and more like another chapter in what they believe has become a growing pattern.
Tonight we had the Seattle Storm, let me get it right, Seattle Storm's co-owner Celeste Keaton berate two young teenage girls who were wearing XXXY shirts with a sign that said, "Thank you, Sophie Cunningham, for speaking up for girls." Here's the two girls right here. They're supporting Sophie Cunningham after she made the remark saying that basically men don't belong, or trans women who were men don't belong in women's sports.
And they don't.
She came over, verbally assaulted them, called them saying the WNBA has suspended her 5 games and fined her. She won't be able to sit on courtside for.
And that is exactly why this conversation has exploded beyond a single game. Instead of discussing basketball, the league has once again found itself consumed by arguments surrounding Sophie Cunningham, Caitlin Clark, the Fever fanbase, reporters, and the growing political divide that seems to follow almost every headline involving the WNBA. Every week it feels like one controversy fades away just in time for another one to take its place. This latest debate took another unexpected turn after a Seattle-based reporter claimed she no longer felt comfortable attending Indiana Fever games because of online threats she said she had received from Fever fans. According to her, she had even started wearing her media credentials backwards so fans would not immediately recognize who she was inside the arena. That statement immediately divided basketball fans. Supporters argued that no journalist should ever receive threats over sports coverage, regardless of who they cover or what opinions they express. The reporter also highlighted a fan rally planned outside Seattle's Climate Pledge Arena, expressing support for Cunningham following the backlash surrounding her recent comments about women's sports. That immediately reignited another emotionally charged debate, with supporters viewing the gathering as a peaceful show of solidarity, while critics argued it carried broader political implications.
Exactly. and I don't want to take too much of this clip, but that's exactly what I saw too much of today. Instead of setting Caitlin Clark a screen, AB goes and gets the ball. Two things can be true right here. One thing that could be true, Stephanie White, this is the offense that Stephanie White, this is what gets Stephanie White hot and bothered, watching AB be the hub. One thing can be true. The second thing that's true, AB, use some common sense. You have basketball IQ, right? I don't want to insult you and say you don't have you have basketball IQ? Then you should know better. Get out the way or set a screen. Those are your two options. Get out the way or set a screen so Caitlin Clark can set you up for an easy finish.
Once again, the basketball itself became almost secondary. The attention moved from box scores and standings to rallies, social media posts, and competing narratives about what Cunningham represents. For some fans, she has become someone willing to say what others are afraid to say. For others, her comments crossed a line they believe should not be crossed. Regardless of where anyone stands, there is little debate about one thing. Sophie Cunningham has become one of the most polarizing figures in the WNBA. As that debate intensified, another social media post claimed that Storm fans were contacting the organization regarding the planned rally, emphasizing Seattle's long-standing support for the transgender community. The Seattle Storm organization released a statement expressing condolences following a tragic shooting near Seattle Center that claimed multiple lives and injured others. Suddenly, the basketball arguments that had dominated timelines throughout the day were overshadowed by a real-life tragedy affecting the local community. For a brief moment, the focus shifted away from internet battles and back to something that genuinely mattered.
The Indiana Fever and Stephanie White, after she shit on the fans yesterday. You know, by the way, in politics, sometimes it can help just to be likable. Stephanie White's not very likable. That's part of her problem, is she does not come across as very likable. And yeah, Stephanie White, the consumers, you do have to answer to them because they can turn the TV off and they quit buying tickets. Again, Indiana has had more empty seats. Shockingly, there were empty seats during a game against...
But once that moment passed, the spotlight returned to the league itself, and another debate quickly emerged. That brings us back to where this entire discussion started. For many fans, the biggest question is no longer whether Sophie Cunningham's comments were controversial, it is whether the response to those comments is beginning to spill onto the court itself. When controversial players consistently find themselves at the center of disputed officiating decisions, people naturally start connecting dots, whether those connections are justified or not. And until the league finds a way to restore confidence in both its officiating and its communication, those questions are only going to become louder. The timing only makes those questions even more difficult to ignore, because this is not happening during a quiet stretch of the season. Instead, every replay is dissected frame by frame across social media, sports shows, podcasts, and YouTube channels, where millions of people are trying to decide whether they just witnessed an honest mistake or something more concerning. That is exactly why the elbow on Sophie Cunningham generated so much attention.
Spicy. It got spicy before the game even started. This is wild, man. Cheryl Reeve running down, pressing Sophie Cunningham about her stance on this whole trans situation. You had the ABC telecast or ESPN, whoever it was, bragging about the t-shirt that head coach of the Minnesota Lynx, Cheryl Reeve, chose to wear. It was like a trans lives, trans kids matter or something like that. This whole thing has blown up.
Had the officials immediately called a foul, the conversation probably would have ended before it even started. Fans might have complained for a few minutes, the teams would have moved on, and everyone would be talking about the final score instead. But when viewers watched the replay, saw the contact, and then saw the officials keep play moving without a whistle, it completely changed the discussion. Almost instantly, people began connecting that moment to everything else surrounding Cunningham over the past several weeks. Her comments about women's sports had already placed her at the center of one of the most emotionally charged debates in sports. Those remarks earned praise from one group of fans and fierce criticism from another. That is exactly what appears to be happening here. The difficult part is that perception often becomes just as important as reality, especially in professional sports, where every major decision is viewed through the lens of fairness and credibility. Fans understand that referees are human and that missed calls are an unavoidable part of every game, regardless of the league or the level of competition. However, the real problem begins when enough people stop believing those mistakes are simply the result of human error and instead start viewing them as evidence of something larger.
It's awful and way too physical. Way too physical. The NBA allows physicality in the finals when the season's at the very end. But they want to keep their players healthy for the regular season and early rounds of the playoffs. Why hurt your content? Adam Silver in the league now. You get to the finals, that's a man's game. Wemby, good luck. WNBA regular season is officiated like UFC. There's no eye gouging, but almost everything else. And she didn't have great communications with players, according.
Every questionable whistle, every controversial no call, and every replay reviewed from multiple camera angles becomes another piece of supposed evidence supporting an already established narrative. Whether those conclusions are accurate or not almost becomes secondary because public perception spreads across social media far more quickly than any official explanation ever could. That is precisely the challenge the WNBA has been facing throughout much of this season. Rather than allowing the conversation to remain focused on spectacular individual performances, rising stars, exciting playoff races, and record-breaking attendance figures, the league has repeatedly found itself pulled back into debates surrounding officiating, league policies, media narratives, and the increasingly tense relationship between players, reporters, and passionate fan bases. For a league enjoying unprecedented growth and attracting more attention than ever before, that creates a delicate balancing act, because not publicity strengthens the product in the same way. Unfortunately, once these kinds of controversies gain momentum, they rarely remain confined to basketball alone. Instead, they often evolve into much broader conversations involving league leadership, media coverage, player treatment, and larger cultural debates that extend well beyond what happens during 40 minutes on the court.
Cheryl Reeve and Sophie Cunningham obviously have vastly different stances on this entire men being able to play in women's sports. I'm just going to call it what it is, okay? Sophie's standing on her side. Cheryl Reeves is on the side of let them play. And it looks like Cheryl Reeves wanted to run down on Sophie Cunningham pre-game and press her about her.
That is exactly what has happened with Sophie Cunningham. What initially began as widespread discussions surrounding her public comments gradually expanded into conversations about officiating, media narratives, fan reactions, league leadership, and the broader cultural issues that continue to divide public opinion. Once that shift occurred, nearly every new development involving Cunningham began to be interpreted through an already existing narrative rather than as an isolated event. If she absorbs a particularly physical during a game, some fans immediately argue that she is being unfairly targeted. If officials fail to call a foul involving her, critics point to it as confirmation of their growing suspicions. Perhaps the greatest challenge for the league moving forward is that these debates show little sign of disappearing anytime soon. If another controversial no-call involving Cunningham occurs next week, many fans will immediately compare it to previous incidents and argue that a pattern is beginning to emerge.
In the league, you've heard the constant concerns about officiating, and it has now reached levels of inconsistency that plague our sport and undermine the integrity in which it operates. Year after year, the only thing that remains consistent is the lack of accountability from our leaders. At Unrivaled this past February, I sat across from Kathy and asked how she planned to address the officiating issues in our league. Her response was, well, only the losers complain about the refs. I also asked how she planned to fix the fact that players like Caitlin, Angel, and Paige, who are clearly driving massive revenue for the league, are making so little for their first 4 years. Her response was, Caitlin should be grateful she makes $16 million off.
Likewise, if another highly physical play involving Caitlin Clark receives significant attention, those discussions will almost certainly become intertwined with the broader concerns many fans already have about consistency in officiating. Each new controversy builds upon the previous one, creating an expanding collection of moments that supporters and critics alike use to reinforce their respective arguments. Whether those conclusions are ultimately fair to the officials themselves is a separate question, but the broader issue remains impossible to ignore. At this moment, that confidence is being tested in ways the WNBA likely never anticipated, and unless future games demonstrate greater consistency or the league provides clearer explanations for its most controversial decisions, these debates are likely to remain at the center of public discussion long after the basketball itself has been.